Good morning. My name is Melissa, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the CA Service Management Community Webcast. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question-and-answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. I would now like to turn the call over to Mr. Greg Smith.
Hi, thank you everybody for joining us on our quarterly webcast. We don't really have any updates or news regarding the global user community this month, this quarter. So what we want to do is start right off with our presentation. We have a panel of CA employees that are going to be going over an overview of the new features and changes that are in Service Desk Manager 12.9, and I'll start off passing it over to Paul C., who's the first person to speak. Paul?
Thanks, Greg. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, depending where you are. Thanks for attending. Belated Happy New Year to everyone. So as Greg indicated, so the intent of today's webcast is to go over an overview of the new features and updates to 12.9. Hopefully, this will provide some good information for those of you who are not familiar with 12.9 and possibly give you some compelling reasons to consider upgrading to 12.9 in the near future. Unfortunately, because of time constraints, we can't go into too much advanced detail on all the new features and updates because we would just be here all day if we were going to do that. But we've left plenty of time at the end for questions and discussions. During those discussions, we could discuss possible future webcast sessions with possible demos and a more technical deep dive into some of the 12.9 features and updates. As well, the session will be recorded, and the recording and the PowerPoint slide will be posted up to the community site later this week. And please feel free to ask questions via the online Q&A through the WebEx Manager. It is being monitored during the discussions, and we will also address any common themes found in the Q&A at the end of the presentation. So we have a very distinguished panel joining us today. Hopefully some of these names are familiar to most of you. There's myself, Paul Coccimiglio, Principal Support Engineer with CA Service Desk Manager. Prior to joining CA, I was actually a Service Desk Administrator for 10 years, so I can definitely relate to some of the challenges that you all face in managing and administrating Service Desk. We also have Alex Perretti, also a Principal Support Engineer with our team. He has over 5 years experience with Service Desk, and he's a recognized subject matter expert in both Service Desk and support automation. We also have Shawn Walsh, a Senior Principal Support Engineer with over 10 years experience with Service Desk. Many of you may have seen Shawn's many technical documents, YouTube videos, and Green Book contributions. And last but not least, we have Alan Help, Advisor Solution Marketing. Alan has over 30 years of experience of bringing various technology solutions to market, and he focuses on the service management solutions with an emphasis on Service Desk. So here's a brief overview of the structure of our call today. First, we're going to do a short stroll down memory lane and go over some of the history of the Service Desk Manager product. Then we'll get right into the new features and updates within Service Desk 12.9. Specifically, we're going to address architectural changes, changes to the knowledge management module, changes to the way attachments are handled, and some other changes as well. So this slide provides a very nice summary as to the history and the evolution of Service Desk. For those of you who were able to attend last week's What's New in CA Service Management session, you will all agree that there are many exciting things that will be happening for CA Service Management in 2014 and beyond. CA Service Desk Manager is part of the overall CA Service Management solution and strategy. Service Desk has evolved over the years and releases as a leader in the enterprise Service Desk solution marketplace. So as you can see here, and we didn't go all the way back to all the releases, but you can see we've come a long way in the evolution of Service Desk. Wondering, does anyone remember the good old Paradigm or Advanced Help Desk 5.5 days? Does anybody still remember or have nightmares about the Java client? Service Desk is definitely an enterprise solution. It streamlines support operations through mobility, self-sufficiency, and tight integration. So as you can see here, 12.1 introduced major changes in regards to CA Business Intelligent Reporting, change management, and multi-tenancy. And as a reminder, 12.1 went end of support on December 31st, 2012. The next release was 12.5. It provided support automation improvements, more granular security in regards to roles and access types, and ticket automation. And as a reminder there, the end of support for 12.5 was May 31st, 2013. In 12.6, it was mainly a user interface or GUI refresh. We introduced features such as search as you type or auto-suggest, the mouse over preview option, list and tab improvements, and the removal of the third-party fast knowledge search engine since it was purchased by Microsoft. As a note, as of today, there is no end of support date announced for 12.6. Then in 12.7, we introduced a new web services, RESTful web services. We expanded our browser support to support some of the newer versions of popular web browsers. We introduced Change Audit and Control Facility within the CMDB and Change Management module. And we also introduced integration with Business Services Insight. And then last but not least, in November of 2013, we introduced 12.9. 12.9 introduced new features such as Advanced Availability, or AA, as you may hear it referred to, TLS support for email, both inbound and outbound, supportability enhancements, such as a GUI version of PDM edits and interval logging, the introduction of Federated Search for third-party search engines, and some embedded third-party upgrades. So as you can see from the top here, there's several integrated modules that provide the flexible solution that businesses demand. We have CA Business Intelligence, support automation, IT PAM for workflow, extraction, unified self-service through the use of OpenSpace, mobile enabler, CMDB, and best practice content. So as you can see, the evolution of services is ever growing and picking up momentum in the marketplace. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass the presentation over to my colleague Alex, and Alex will start by going over the advanced availability feature within 12.9. Alex?
Hello, everybody. So as Paul mentioned, I'm going to go into a little more details on the advanced availability features. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a diagram here. This should be a topology that you're familiar with if you're currently using Service Desk, or if you've maybe looking into Service Desk. This is a standard, primary, secondary servers. You got a remote database. And this is a pretty typical setup. And you'll see here some of the key things is that the primary server is connecting directly to the database, while the secondary servers are routing through the primary server. So this is what we refer to as conventional topology, and one you're probably familiar with. With 12.9, you can continue to use a conventional physical topology, but we also introduce a new advanced availability option. So you notice here that things are a little different, a few more arrows. We have the background and standby server and application servers, and they're all basically establishing connections to the database. And we'll go into a little more details on what these different things mean as we continue along. So advanced availability. So what is the purpose of advanced availability? It's basically to help reduce the downtime resulting from application hardware failures, and also to reduce the downtime by providing for rolling maintenance on servers. And with the rolling maintenance, you could have a minimal impact to the end user base. So basically what it comes down to is that with advanced availability, you can reduce the amount of time to get your server back up. It reduces the points. It reduces the possibility of a single point of failure. You can now have, if one part of the environment happens to go down, other parts of the environment can continue to work without a problem. And also the great feature of being able to use rolling maintenance, so you could apply patches or different updates to the environment and not have to bring the whole environment down, which is a very helpful feature. And we'll continue along. So with advanced availability, there are some new terms that are introduced. First, we have the concept of the background server. So the background server kind of replaces the role of a primary server. It's basically the core of the architecture. It runs the singleton processes. Now, a singleton process would be, for an example, a mail eater, BOP login, authentication, different processes that are only running on a single server. The background server still controls those things. However, it's not as restrictive as with the traditional setup, and we'll discuss that a little more. You also have a standby server. Standby server is basically a mirror image of the background server, and it's basically waiting in the wings for, if there's a possibility of a problem with the background server, you could either quickly transition the standby server to become a background server, or if you have an additional monitoring tools in place, you could even have an automated failover from the standby server to the background server. You can have multiple standby servers in your environment as well if you have need for that, but that's basically the purpose of a standby server. Now, an application server basically takes the place of secondary servers, but it's even more powerful. The application server actually has its own slump process. In a conventional system, slump is completely controlled by the primary server. With this, slump is spread across the board to all the application servers have their own slump. So even if the background server were to go down, application servers can still continue to run in a limited fashion. So if users are already logged into the services application server, they can continue to do most of their work because application servers also maintain a direct connection to the database as well. So they can continue doing work even while the background's down, and then once you bring a background up or when you fail over the standby to make that the background, then things will continue as normal. So that's a great feature of having advanced availability. The concept of failing over, we already touched on that point, but that's basically just to promote a standby server to a background server is called failing it over. Now, quiesce is a term that's specific to application servers, and basically what quiescing a server is you can enter a command to initiate a shutdown process for that server. So let's say you're going to perform some rolling maintenance. Let's say you have an application server that you're going to apply a patch to. You can quiesce the server, which gives a time frame for when the server will shut down. The end users will be notified of this shutdown, and then they'll be able to save their work and log out and maybe move to another application server. And then once the quiesce process is complete, the server will be shut down, and then maintenance can be performed on that server. So it's much cleaner than having to send emails to your user base and say, I have to bring services down in an hour to apply patches. You can quiesce it, and the users will get a pop-up notification that the server will be coming down. And I'll show you an example of a screenshot in a couple of slides on that. And a singleton process, we kind of talked about that a little as well. There are still some particular processes that are still controlled by the background server. I gave the example mail eater. The authentication is still handled by the background server. There's a bunch of other ones, but for the most part, those are stored only on the background server. So here's another slide showing you kind of the setup of the environment. So here I'm just going to hopefully be able to use this highlighter here. So we have the background server right here, and the standby server. So the standby server is it's in a cold wait state. It's running, it's waiting, but it's not doing much. And then once you need to once you need to manually failover, you could failover, or if you have an additional tool to perform an automatic failover, that can happen as well. Now, as I mentioned, you have your application servers, and sorry, my thing's a little sloppy here, but these connect directly to the database, which is a major difference from a conventional. Previously, the secondary servers have to connect to the background server to the primary server to access the database, but now they connect directly to the database. So the concepts of secondary servers no longer exist. Everything is basically in control of itself. There's not a reliance on a primary server anymore. The primary server was replaced by the background standby server pair. And we mentioned server pair, but in reality, you could have multiple standby servers as well if needed. All servers has direct access to the database, and a lot of stuff we kind of touched on already. So I'll just go ahead and continue. We pretty much touched on most of that information. So here's some of the screenshots I mentioned in regards to the quiescing. So on a secondary server, let's say you put a command in that the server is going to shut down within a certain time frame. Users would get this pop-up right here, basically saying that the server is scheduled to shut down shortly and that they could complete their work and then log out. Now, if in your environment, it's kind of an assumption that you would perhaps have a load balancer to balance the load between application servers. You can then remove one of the application servers from the load balancer when maintenance is going to be performed on it. So that way the users would just log right in again and hit a different application server. So that's kind of an assumption here. So it kind of helps things to continue to run. And then also there's a delayed server response. So if there's any problem with the user having a delay write to the server, we have a new screen here that gives a slightly different error message. It kind of keeps your user base more informed that maybe there's a delay, and then once the delay is, once there's no longer a delay, it clears itself. And the other thing is a login refusal. So when a server is in quiesce mode, basically it'll prevent users from being able to log into that server. So that's why you would typically remove a server from a load balancer if you're going to perform maintenance on it. That way when the users go to log in again, they're not hitting a server that's coming offline. So that's kind of a new screenshot, kind of gives you a little information there. Along with advanced availability, and kind of in the spirit of removing points of failure and helping to spread things across the board so you don't have a single point of failure, we've also introduced some changes to the attachments. So one of the big features is support for UNC drives for Windows network shares. So you don't have to keep your file attachment repository on the primary server anymore. You could actually put it onto a separate share, which you could have backups, perform different maintenance. Maybe you might have it on some kind of replication going on with that. So you could put it on a UNC path and remove that from the primary server. So you don't even have to worry about the space that it's consuming on the primary server as well. And tying into the advanced availability, there's support for having the repository managed by multiple repositories. So you could have the background and the standby pointing to your repository. So when you fail over the environment, then the other server will just take its place. And also there's some enhancements to the user interface, which I'll show that in the next slide here. So there's a couple of changes to the repository, so I'll just highlight them here below. So one new feature is the UNC credentials, which that is a little sloppy looking, unfortunately. Yeah, there we go. So UNC credentials, I'll just highlight it here. So what you could do is you could set up a data record for a username and password of the UNC path, and then that could be specified there. And then you could also, you have the servlet server and the repository server. Now in previous releases, you had to actually specify the server name and then specify the servlet URL and all that additional information. Those are on separate records now. So now the repository attachment settings themselves, has a cleaner look. You don't have the URLs and everything on here. Now you could just specify a server name in the repository server path. And so there's just some overall changes to the overall look and feel of the attachments. But one of the big things is being able to share it on the UNC path, so you're not tied down to having to store it on your service test server. Now with that being said, at this point, I'm going to hand over things to my colleague Shawn. I'm going to pass things over to him, and he'll go over some additional features of Service Test 12.9. Shawn.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex. My name is Shawn Walsh. Chances are I've worked with you at some point in the past. If you've ever opened a support issue, I certainly see a lot of familiar names on the list. So I'm going to be talking about some of the other new features in 12.9, starting with TLS support. TLS is the descendant of SSL is essentially the predecessor of TLS. TLS allows for encryption for email, and that's both for the incoming email, which is the PDM mail eater, which you may be familiar with. And we also have TLS support for outbound email as well, which is PDM mail, SMTP mail typically. I just want to say that TLS and SSL are not always necessarily the same thing. The way in which they work is a little bit different. So as you're considering using this, just be sure to speak with your email server administrator about what the email system supports, if it supports TLS and SSL. And also whether you need any certificates, and I'll share an example of that on the next slide. So on the previous slide, for the incoming email, you would configure that just like you would in 12.5, 12.6, or 12.7. You'd have a mailbox that you would configure, no recycle needed. For the outbound mail, you have the PDM mail NXD daemon, which now supports the base 64 encoded certificates. So in Options Manager, you can specify a path to the certificates, to the keys, so you can encrypt the traffic between the outbound email client in Service Desk and your outbound email server. But again, just make sure that you consult with your email server administrator about what certificates are needed. Also, there are some caveats and differences between TLS and SSL. One of the new features for 12.9 is built-in interval logging. Now, this was added in previous releases, 12.9, for example. What's new here in 12.9 is a UI. So no longer do you have to edit and control batch files or run automated tasks on the machine or scripts to gather data about the environment. You can now do that in the UI. And the reason for running interval logging is just with any distributed application. From time to time, you may run into performance problems. There may be something in the environment taking resources away, disk I/O, CPU, memory. There may be items in the application that need to be tweaked or configured correctly as appropriate for your environment, perhaps too many users pointing to one web engine, et cetera. So this allows us to dynamically control the gathering of those statistics and select which statistics we want to gather. It's very helpful for support, and for you as well, if you want to make sure that the system is operating under peak performance. So you can control the recurrence interval. You can control whether it's enabled or not. It is optional. There's on the bottom you can see the interval logging options. You have the option to select various different items, CPU usage, memories, number of users, etc. So this data is extremely helpful for support to isolate problems and identify trends. And it's something that we would typically recommend that you enable when and if you see performance problems. It's helpful for us so we can work with you and get those resolved as quickly as possible. .12.9 does maintain the standard conventional architecture. So a little while ago you heard Alex talk about the advanced availability. Prior to that, in earlier releases, we have the primary, secondary server topology that is still available in 12.9. So understandably, you may not want to put in too much change at once. Maybe going to a new release and changing the architecture, it introduces a good bit more risk than what you're ready for. You can still maintain the standard primary, secondary server topology architecture. However, now you can all do it through a UI. So all you need to do is log into the web interface and go to the administration menu and navigate to the configuration. And here you can add server configurations. So you can add DOM servers, object managers, web engines, etc. Web directors, of course, too. So you can distribute the load with Web Director is a built-in load balancer. You can identify which servers. This gets enabled. In the past, we had to run a curl script and copy a bunch of configuration files. What's fantastic about this is you don't need to do that anymore. You just come into the UI, you configure the servers as desired, and all you need to do is run configuration, PDM configure on your primary and secondary servers, and all of the files and everything else is copied and implemented automatically. There have been some changes in our licensing model. We now use the Goldbrick license, and there's a document on support.ca.com. So as users log in, we're not going to have that extra check against the license to see if we've exceeded the number of licenses. So we're not going to limit any functionality based on a number of users connected or based on what you're licensed for. However, for compliance purposes, we still maintain the key performance indicators, the KPIs for license checks. It's still available. 12.9 also introduces a major new feature called Federated Search. Federated Search allows you to crawl external search engines, external knowledge sources. We ship with 3 examples out of box that can be enabled with some configuration. That is the Google Custom Search Engine API, which is part of the Google Developer Tools, SharePoint integration, and integration with our own CA OpenSpace. Now, with any of these, the CA OpenSpace is something you'd set up and have had set up already, and then you'd go through the steps to configure the Federated Search to integrate with that. For SharePoint, this will take some coordination with your SharePoint administration team. Make sure that SharePoint is configured as needed for Service Desk, etc. Google allows you to use their Google Developer Tool, specifically the Google Custom Search Engine. What this allows you to do is, through the Google Developer Tools, you can point it to a specific site or sites that you want to search. So when you initiate that call in the back end from Service Desk through the Federated Search API and it goes to Google, it's going to search those sites. That being said, that does also take some planning because you need to sign up for a Google Developer account, which is free. However, you would potentially may need some developer resources, someone familiar with the Google Developer Tools to fully implement that. Also, Google gives you the first so many transactions per day as a free of charge. However, in a production environment, you could quickly exceed that, so there's going to be some costs involved. So just something to think about and read about before you try to implement. And while doing the search, analysts can actually select which repositories that they want to search. Maybe they just want to search the standard knowledge tools, only search open space, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. Another part of Federated Search is we can have external search engines now search service desk. So go in the other direction almost. We can have it search tickets and knowledge content. So there's attachments. So there's a good deal of configuration that goes into that as well. Obviously, with both of these aspects of the Federated Search, we supply some batch files and the documentation implements some sample integrations. But just bear in mind that it does take some planning and it does take some testing to make sure that it's working as desired. On the next slide here, you can see an example of what that looks like from the user perspective. As we create Federated Search resources in Service Desk, they are now available. These screenshots show you what the incident detail knowledge management tab looks like. And as those Federated Search sources are published, you now have the option to select which one you want to search. SharePoint, OpenSpace, and Google, you can see there in the top left. Then you get an indication, you'll see in the middle screenshot that the user had selected SharePoint and Google, and now the search results indicate that as well at the top of the column heading. And the last one gives an example of searching Google, just selecting the one check. So you can determine what knowledge repositories you want to search. You do not need to implement all three of these. These are just listed here as an example. However, you can decide that maybe you only want to implement the Federated Search with SharePoint or OpenSpace or Google individually. Federated Search is not required for knowledge tools. It's an optional add-on feature that you can use to enhance the search experience. So somewhat less exciting, but important to mention are some common component updates. Service Desk, the SDK for EEM, what that is the sort of the client side of the equation for the integration with Embedded Entitlements Manager for authentication, is it's no longer compatible with the EEM 8.4. So if you're using EEM for other CA applications or custom applications, make sure that you're planning for the version that's being used with those, and that those other CA apps support EEM 12.5. If there's a need to maintain or continue to use EEM 8.4, you can request a patch from support. So you can ask for the solution to problem number 2678, and that should be published on a support site shortly as well. Now, the other side of it, the EEM server itself, we ship with 12.51. And that gives you some new features such as integrating with multiple LDAP sources and a number of other components that may be of interest to you. Java has been updated as well, so the Java SC, the Java runtime environment has been updated. This is important if you're concerned about some of the security risks, security flaws that have been in the news over the past year. Support automation now also has support for Java 1.7. And here you just need to open a support issue or look at support online and ask the solution for the solution to 2676. Prior to this, I believe it supported Java 1.6. So Paul covered a number of the items in our recent Service Desk history, a number of the new features added in recent releases. So now we're going to look to the future, and with that, I will turn it over to Alan Halep, who will talk about the future of service management. Alan?
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to talk about not necessarily the future, but something that's here today. After we released 12.9, we came out with some very exciting capabilities that we announced. There was a big launch last week, a press release focused on what we call the new CA service management, which encompasses the releases of Service Desk Manager 12.9, as well as IT Asset Manager 12.9, CA Service Catalog 12.9, but also two very important capabilities that are available to you, and hopefully you'll leverage these in the future. And really, we are taking a very business-centric approach. Our strategy is focusing on business, trying to bring some of the business back into IT, focusing on the consumer experience with what we're calling a unified collaborative self-service, as well as a unified mobility capabilities. So building upon capabilities we've had in the past with CA Open Space and the collaborative space, and also the mobility, the CA Service Desk Manager mobile app. So let me just give you a couple points about these, and then we'll get back to the rest of the session. Unified collaborative self-service. This focuses on user satisfaction and productivity, and really what we're trying to do is, IT service management sophistication and maturity don't need to be equated with a complex user experience. We're really delivering a one-stop shop for employees to ask questions, to collaborate, to make requests behind the scenes through Service Catalog, view their assets, as well as, of course, resolve issues. And we've done that with this unified collaborative self-service. It leverages much of the capabilities and technology that we've all known as open space over the years, but it expands upon that to deliver much more of a storefront for consumer-like one-stop shopping for all those things I just mentioned. Leverages, you can see many of the same features that you may have seen in open space in terms of collaborative social media-like self-service, but it really does, you'll see other things on here that you didn't used to see, such as looking at your assets, looking at your services, being able to request services. So it brings all these things together into one place. This does replace CA Open Space. This is what you will see if you leverage it. It is available desktop, tablet, mobile device. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Of course, if you want to leverage the services, the My Services, or look at your assets, you have to have the underlying components of CA Service Catalog or CA IT Asset Manager for this. But this does deliver a much more a broader one-stop shop for the end users of our service. There's a lot of business value can be derived from this. I'm not going to go through that in detail for the sake of time, but obviously this does really start to rebrand IT as more of a business-centric part of the organization, and this can help IT gain much more engagement with the business and the end user community. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about mobility and the CA Service Management mobile app. You may be familiar with the CA Service Desk mobile app. This replaces that, and this again takes a unified approach to, in this case, mobility, where we now have a single mobile optimized solution that goes across the capabilities that we just discussed. It covers the looking at your assets, looking at services, requesting services, and so forth. You have all the capabilities there that you had before in the CA Service Desk mobile app, such as the ticket creation, queue management for the analysts, and collaboration and knowledge search, but now it also brings in the requests and the viewing of assets, again, if you have the back-end catalog or IT Asset Manager capability. So this is now available out on iTunes and Google Play, and it's a single app, and based upon the products you have installed, your role, and the settings that you select, you will see specific capabilities associated with them. So again, mobile app across the CA Service Management solution set, giving that anytime, anywhere access and increasing user productivity and the standard benefits that you would think. So these things are standard capabilities that are available to you. There's no extra charge for these. Please make sure to leverage them. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Paul to continue.
Thanks, Alan. And thanks to Shawn and Alex for your content as well. So that is all of the slides that we have. And like I said at the beginning, we ensured that we left lots of time for discussions and questions and answers. So our online Q&A has been being monitored during the session, and we were fortunate enough to have our colleague Raghu who many of you probably have talked to in the past, monitor the Q&A. So Raghu, at this time, while we're waiting for people to come up with their questions over the phone, if you want to maybe just talk about a couple common questions or themes that you saw through the Q&A, and operator, if we can start opening up the lines for questions, that would be great as well.
Okay. To ask an audio question, please press *1.
Hey, Paul. While we are waiting on that, yeah, a couple of questions were around advanced availability, again, and that being the new feature with respect to handling service desk availability. We did get a few around that topic. Most of it was about how do we manage application servers. Is it going to impact the database directly, because the application servers are able to manage database connections directly from themselves. Would that be impacting database licenses? Yes, because we are talking about active database connections from those servers which never existed before. But just in general, we are getting a lot of questions on advanced availability, though. Just a thought, maybe we could have a session just dedicated to AA. That was one of the things that I was going to take away. And the other one was around knowledge and repositories like UNC enablement. Can we have knowledge servers, repository servers in different locations, or can they have individual UNC accesses? Can they publish to SharePoint, etc.? As long as a repository server can be configured to point to a specific UNC location, as long as the credentials are enough, then yes, each repository server could have its own UNC location in that sense. Customizations, again, rolled maintenance, so to speak. Can we just or is AA supported only for Windows patching, or is it also supported for service desk patching? That was another question too. And yes, you could use AA in that sense, so that you can roll out service desk patches or customizations as well as part of the rolling maintenance mode.
Yeah, Raghu, mind if I interject a second?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I mean, obviously, I think we all knew that AA would probably strike the most conversation today, and it's not surprising that we have so many questions. I just want to kind of clarify a little information that I've seen some questions come up a couple times. So obviously many of the people on this call, they're already using Service Desk Manager, and so the concern is, you know, maybe you want to migrate to 12.9, but how do you get to events availability when you perform that migration? So just to quickly state, so if you're on a previous release of Service Desk, you'll migrate to 12.9, and it's going to basically be in conventional mode at that point. It's going to basically act like a, you know, primary, secondary. Within the Service Desk 12.9 interface in the administrative section, there's a section to add servers. Well, what you would firstly do is you would run a PDM configure on the background server, and you could change it to advanced availability mode from the PDM configure. Then once you have your background server functioning, then you need to go into the administration tab and add entries for your additional servers, and then basically assign those additional servers their role. So you would say this server is going to be the standby, this one's going to be the application. And then when you run PM configure on those servers to set them to events availability mode, then they would act in those roles that they were assigned. And that's basically how it works. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
Thank you, Alex. Operator, do we have anyone on the phone as well waiting for a question?
We have a question from the line of Efra Panina.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. So yeah, about AA. So Alex, thank you for answering that. That clarifies a lot. The other question is, do we need to, does this AA feature impact other things that we have? For example, the way we have customization in HTML forms, or the way we have ITPAM processes interacting with the creation of tickets or change orders, all that. Does any of that changes once you have AA implemented?
No, it shouldn't. I mean, because with like ITPAM, for example, ITPAM, the options manager is still pointing to the same ITPAM URL. So yeah, I mean, there should be no effect in that regard as far as your workflow processes and things of that nature.
Great. And another quick question, if I may. You mentioned that an application server talks directly to the database, which is awesome. But then you mentioned that there are, if the background server is down, there will be some functionality that will be down, and some things that will still work because the application server is now more capable. So can you give us some examples of what things will be up and what things will be down when background server is down?
Well, one example would be authentication. New users would not be able to log in. If you were already logged in, you would be okay, but new users wouldn't be able to log in. SLA triggers are all handled by the background server, so your animator is handled by the background. So obviously for SLAs and stuff like that, you want to get it up and running again right away. So that stuff fires right. Mail eater is handled by the background server. That's off the top of my head. I know those are the definites.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
No problem.
Again, to ask an audio question, please press *1.
And while we're waiting here, everyone, so like we said, the Q&A has been very active during the presentation. So as part of the recording and the PowerPoint slide, we will also post the Q&A to the community site as well. So we'll basically clean up the Q&A, try to group similar questions together and their answers, so then everybody can see what kind of questions are asked and their responses as well, just in case we're not able to get to all of them within the hour time frame. So if there's no further questions, let me ask a question out to everybody here. So as Raghu and Alex indicated, right, we sort of anticipated AA being a top discussion point here. Would it be beneficial and helpful if we had a follow-up session at some point in the future in regards to a more deep dive and technical discussion about AA and how it works and how to use and implement some of the AA features? Is that some things that users on this call would like to see? And you guys can either ask a question or just reply through the Q&A if you want.
Do you have an audio question, sir?
Sure, go ahead.
We have a question from the line of Jamie Hensley.
Hi, this is Jamie Hensel from CNO Financial.
Hi, Jamie. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. A little cold, but other than that. So we currently use both ITPAM and CA workflow. Mm-hmm. So when we go to 12.9, will CA workflow integrate with this also? We're moving away from it, but we do still have some processes that we run through there.
So your question then is, can you still use workflow with 12.9?
Yes. That's my question.
Let me just verify something for you real quick. So as you know, in case anybody else is curious, so as you know, ITPAM is basically the focus in terms of workflow automation, not only with Service Desk, but other CA solutions as well, right? So ITPAM is a lot more robust and feature-rich as compared to workflow. So any future development work or enhancements and things like that will be done in ITPAM. And let me just verify your question about workflow in 12.9.
Yeah, Paul, to answer that question, the answer is yes. It will still work. But as Alex was mentioning, support is for CA workflow will be end of life, if soon, but it will still work.
Yeah, it's actually, it went end of life December, this past December. So,
so I guess. So there's the answer to your question, Jamie. And then obviously, you know, if you can, you know, if you have both ITPAM and workflow, you definitely want to be doing any new development in ITPAM as opposed to workflow.
Oh, absolutely, and we are, but we're kind of transitioning things from CA workflow into ITPAM, which we're actually using Service Catalog with ITPAM on the back end of it to deploy servers.
Yeah, and we understand it's not an easy transition, right? Especially, you know, if you, depending on how many workflows you have written and the complexity of them, it's not an easy transition, right? But it will definitely be worth the effort at the end.
Well, fortunately, someone other than myself is doing that, so. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Do we have any other questions on the phone?
Yes, sir. Your next question comes from the line of Raghu.
Hey,
go ahead.
Hi. You were talking about, so one is high availability, and one is I was wondering how would we do the schema changes? You know, if you're going to bring the server down for maintenance, or I was just wondering. You said, you know, we don't have to, you know, always keep the environment up, right? I mean, you don't have to bring it down, right? And I was told in R12.9 you can do maintenance, keeping the service desk up and running. So does that also include schema changes?
Yeah, you can make schema changes to 12.9 without bringing the whole environment down. There's particular steps you have to follow, which are documented in the documentation. But it is possible to go through the process of schema changes. It just needs to be done in a particular fashion. But you could do it without bringing down the whole environment.
And how about the spell changes, spell code changes?
It would be the same, similar type of feature. Pretty much the only significant change the significant patch or change that would have to require a restart of Service Desk completely would be an update, a patch to the MDB itself. A patch to the MDB would require bringing down the full Service Desk environment, but schema changes, options manager changes, most Service Desk patches, most Windows patches that you could, if you could stagger it, you should be able to keep the environment in parts up.
So does that mean, say, for example, if we are talking about schema changes, do we need the procedure that you have, do we need to do server-based server? The only reason I'm asking is, say, if you have 6 different servers, right, and you do it successfully in 3, and for some reason you missed out some step on 4 and 5, just wondering if there will be any inconsistency, or you have a procedure wherein it will push to all 6 servers so that, we don't have to worry about inconsistencies.
Oh, no, version control should handle schema changes.
Okay.
So it's not as if you need to log into Web Screen Painter on each server and make a schema change. Version control would make the push to the other servers to update the files. But like I said, the order needs to be followed pretty specifically. Otherwise, things can get messed up with version control. So the procedure is documented, though.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Operator, I guess we'll take one more call, one more answer via the phone, and then we'll pass it over to Greg for final remarks. So is there one more call, one more question that we have?
Yes, sir. We have a question from the line of Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Hello. My question is centered around spell customizations. We have a very high level of spell customizations in our environment right now. We're interested in the advanced availability feature. The question is are the spell customizations required to be done on each of the servers, or is there a one place / propagate situation?
I mean, it really depends on the nature of the spell customization. Are you just creating spell files and putting them into the magic directory?
That's correct, but one of the things that we specifically have is something that kicks off a locally stored batch file, and that's one that I would be most interested in finding out because, would I have to store it on each of the application servers as well?
Yeah, that each server is running its own spell server process.
Okay.
So if the spell server on application server 2 were to trigger that spell file, it would have to be able to find the bat file on that server.
On its own server now, but I don't have to go into each of the application servers and edit the spell files on every single one of them, do I? The spell files themselves.
Yeah, usually you would have to I'm not sure if version control would automatically copy the spell files between servers.
Okay.
That would probably have to be manually updated.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, guys. So thanks everyone for the phone questions and the online Q&A. Like I said, we'll summarize the Q&A and also post it up with the recording in the presentation. And thanks everyone for joining. So at this time, I'll pass it back over to Greg for some final remarks. Greg?
Thanks. Just again, this session will be posted online. Thank you for attending. We don't have the date for the next quarterly webcast scheduled yet, but be watching your emails, watching your inbox for email in the coming weeks on that. Thank you, everybody. See you next quarter.
Thank you for joining today's conference call. You may now disconnect your line.